In this episode of Chasing Psychological Safety, the video series, where we do our interviews with superheroes, today we're speaking to James Simon, a long-term friend of People Know Tech and of this fight towards getting more of the human work done. James has single-handedly been moving mountains in terms of teams and understanding their needs for years now, and we are absolutely delighted to have had him on the show. Read his profile on LinkedIn, go search the things that he is agreeing with, look at the places that he's attending, and make sure that you follow his work, because everything that James says is very likely to be spot on in terms of what is needed to make high-performing teams. Let's listen to James talking about psychological safety and his relationship with happy and high-performing teams in the next few minutes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chasing Psychological Videocast side of things. And we are really fortunate to have someone who we admire dearly today on the show, someone who's been doing the fight on how important it is to do human things for quite a while, and someone whom we've been privileged to get to know over the last couple of years. So James, thank you for coming on, and thank you for agreeing to talk to us about your experience with psychological safety. So why don't we just jump straight in? I'm going to ask the same question that we ask everyone at the very beginning, which is, when in your memory have you first heard of psychological safety, and what did you think of it then?
Oh my goodness. So I was working at a large OEM, and my director came to me and started talking to me about DevOps, which was kind of on the periphery of my knowledge, but I hadn't really heard of it before. So I read Accelerate, and there was a lot of language about psychological safety in there. But I kind of glossed over it. I was interested in sort of the more mechanical things. And then what did I read next? I read The Phoenix Project and about 3 or 4 other books, and psychological safety just kept coming up over and over and over again as this thing that was sort of foundational to being able to do DevOps. And then I went to DUS, the DevOps Enterprise Summit conference, and I saw the two of you give a talk. And that's when it really hit home. I see what this is now. And as I started reflecting and looking around me, I realized that, not maliciously where I was, but in an attempt to get the most out of me and my colleagues, our bosses were producing an environment that was actually pretty miserable. And just a lot of stress, a lot of overload, and a lot of people not speaking up and saying anything about it. So I thought, wow, if we're going to make it, we'd probably better start addressing this like now, and in a way that could be effective. So that's when I came back to the two of you, and we started talking about, hey, what can I do? And it wound up fundamentally changing my personal mission and bringing me around to the idea of focus, flow, and joy. And and it's interesting because at that same time as I was talking to you, I got pulled into these dojos where you work in a really, really high touch, high collaboration way. And I started to see how fundamentally different work could be, right? And how much better it could be. And sort of what a team, it changed my definition of a team for sure. And how that can feel and operate and be more efficient, right? All at the same time. So it all kind of coalesced together all at once, and it was really, really revelatory and amazing, and has probably changed the way that I'll work for the rest of my life.
That's lovely, and thank you for saying that. But for the record, and for anyone listening to this, we weren't setting you up so you talk about that necessarily. I thought your origin story is older than that. But one thing I would like to go back to, because I think it's really important as a minor kind of point for people that don't know about it. A dojo, just as a really loose definition, we would encourage you that you kind of go read about it, is the height of collaboration, experimentation together with people brought from various places. They don't need to be a team to begin with, but they become a team by the end of it, through the power of learning together. Yeah, so thank you so much for that answer. It's I think really important that we start putting the timelines in place for everyone that knows about the concept, and kind of we all come together and find ways to move it forward, because it's the only way that we're going to give it to teams. We do have a couple of other questions, so I'll just pass the microphone to Fionn. And
sure, thanks very much. So I guess to build on the beginning of the story that you've started to tell us, we'd like to ask you and get your insights on what you're seeing of psychological safety out there in the technology space at the moment.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, and we touched on this a little bit before the podcast. I see the term everywhere, and that grows, right? Including in my new role, back in my old role, psychological safety gets discussed a lot, and it's funny because it's penetrated to the point where people recognize it as being foundational to almost anything they want to do. Like we talked about inclusion, diversity, and equity. We talked about teams and high performance teams, DevOps. All of that, people seem to be able to say, hey, psychological safety is really important. I think we're at a point, though, where people misunderstand maybe what that is. They try to oversimplify it and perhaps often feel like they have a handle on it without having to do anything intentional and sort of disciplined about it. And that, I think, is a bummer because you wind up with people thinking it's another thing that, you know, just a lot like lean or agile. They think they're doing it, right? They think they've got a handle on it. And maybe it's just a single boss or a group of bosses saying, just declaring we're going to be psychologically safe. And then, you know, stepping up in meetings, perhaps when people are, you know, sort of being bullying, and thinking that that's enough, right? But it's really not. And it really has to, you have to make a space, I guess, where people are truly comfortable bringing their real selves to work and their real opinions and sharing those in a respectful way, right? And I guess that's sort of where I see things. And the push that I made didn't get psychological safety to the place where it needed to be, or where it could be at work. But we did get on a path of subordinates being able to say to their managers, no, look, that's not okay, right? And that's not all psychological safety, of course, but it's a start, right? And if they can say those things amongst each other and to their management, like, hey, I'm not going to be in a meeting on Sunday, right? It's just not going to happen, right? That has to be okay. And that's just a small kernel of it. But unfortunately, I really think that there's a high hill to climb in terms of people really understanding, especially at the management level, what psychological safety is and how to practically implement that along with all the other things, whether it's agile or DevOps or lean, right? My feeling, and I said to you guys, is my feeling is you have to be optimum in psychological safety. You have to have real teams. That is, people that work together at the same time on the same things, right? Not simply report to the same person or work together or work apart on the same things at the same time, right? If you're not working directly together, it's just impossible, I think, to have the best of psychological safety. You know, it's just very, very difficult. And I look to heroes like Woody Zuill to talk about, you know, to show us what it looks like to really be a part of a team, right? So that's kind of where I see things. It's penetrated the mind, and the verbiage has made it into the culture. I feel like, though, the actions stop people short, right? Even when it's very clear what you need to do. I think the desire to take that time,
right,
is not quite there yet.
What do you
brings us? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Which kind of really brings us to the bigger question of how much resistance do you see? So we've often talked about this. You're one of those people that we would call a human work superhero, someone who kind of advocates for the fact that we have to do the people work. Us non-people worky types have to find a way to do the people work. So which kind of is essentially a different way of putting what you were saying earlier in terms of we have to do the things we have to start doing and stop talking to a degree. So in terms of resistance, we talk a lot about the fact that there's organizational level resistance, and then there's people level resistance, team level resistance, if you wish. And the organizational one is all the things you'd expect, like we don't have the money, we don't really care, we have all this human debt anyways, it's fine to have more of it. Whereas the people or team level one would be around the lack of habit and the lack of being called to have done this work ever before. So which one of these would you say is the bigger blocker and the bigger impact for roadblock to getting this into
that sort of gets to the heart of a debate that is raging even as we speak amongst the DevOps community. I have come from a red shirt, right, rebellion place of from the ground up. But there's also this question of, can you achieve any of this without top level support, right? Without top level, in fact, driving it more than support. And I think I'm coming around to the opposite opinion of where I started. I think you have to have both, but a lot of times the resistance that I see at the people level, at the working level, is about, look, man, I've got too much to get done. To stop and bother about this psychological safety stuff. I have, 5 different projects I'm working on. They're all overdue because companies don't limit work in progress and they don't care about context switching, right? So to stop and even click a few buttons on a dashboard like yours, right, takes 5 minutes a day, feels like too much, right? And then to go and do the work on the relationships, it's no different than in our regular lives, right? The siblings you don't talk to and the friends that you don't maintain your relationships with because you just feel like you don't have time. These things are sort of central to our health and well-being, and we don't do them. So at the working level, that's what I see. It's different at the top organizational level. Maybe there's a tool you got to pay for, or maybe it'll slow the work down temporarily. My gut feeling is that it really just, everything gets better immediately if it comes from the top. If management can start saying, look, we are going to take care of our health and well-being as people, as employees, as teams, and then they offer up investment, whether it's time or money or both, then I think that things change, right? So obviously the troops have to follow. And so it's sort of one of those things where you have to have both, I guess. I think the biggest impact though comes when you change the culture at the top, right? When they decide to invest and they start speaking and meaning it, right? Then things change. Because I've seen it go where, the top level starts saying the things, but they provide no mechanism, right? And they do other things that run counter to it, and that's worse almost than doing nothing. But if the if the C level starts really investing in truly in ID&E and psychological safety and team building, right, and focus, flow, and joy, if they really fundamentally understand the value that can bring to their company, and they start pushing it, then I think you get the lower decks on board. And I think that now you've got something, right? A transformation engine that will carry you forward, I think. That's my experience.
And what do you, just really one last quick question, building on what you said there, in your mind, what do you see as the big opportunities for the technology companies that do go big time on psychological safety, top, bottom, all around?
Well, and for me, everything's about flow, right? Flow of value. And if you've organized properly in teams, if you put psychological safety at kind of the heart of that, then you wind up being able to sort of work your way through the problems, right? In a very deliberate and safe way, right? You stop finding things attractive like individual contributor metrics. You stop finding things attractive like, say, safe, right? Sort of you get less obsessed with ritual and more into the collaboration of creating the thing, right? And that way you're able to surface and solve problems together collectively a lot better. I think a company that's doing that, I think you can see it out there. It's in the DevOps report every year, right? The companies that are doing that are simply more have more agility, right? And are bringing things to market better, faster, and with higher quality. There's kind of a book that's similar to that, right? Title. So so that's where I feel like the real opportunity is. Whether you're a mega technology company like the one I'm working for now, or a very small one, I think you're just going to perform better if your people are able to like disagree and commit, if they're able to surface problems together collectively and solve them, if they're not afraid to go to management, right? And then at the very least, you're going to avoid things like what happened with Boeing, right? I don't know if you guys have seen that documentary that just came out about it, but I watched it and I thought of you immediately as I'm watching it. I'm like, wow, like this should be a big red flag and a lesson for everybody who's thinking about psychological safety whatsoever. Like it should make it feel urgent to implement it, especially if anything that you do has to do with people's safety, right? You just absolutely have to have that culture and that capability to surface problems and be unafraid to do that, and feel like if you do, not only you're not going to be punished, but someone's going to help you fix it, right? That's the really important thing is there anybody out there amongst my colleagues that are going to help me fix this problem, right? So I think that's it. I think that's the opportunity is to avoid that and to get to market with quality faster, right?
So it's thank you. I think that's you've really painted for us really clearly. There is the direct link between the market, the user, the customer, the commercial, and building this beautiful, practical environment of psychological safety and creating, truly fearless organizations. So thank you very much for your time, James. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you again.
Yes. I love talking to you too. And I'm very glad that you asked me to do this. Thank you.
We always learn something and we always think of more things, and it always feels like this particular team will make things happen. So thanks so much for that, James.
Thank you.